Hi, everybody. Welcome to our October edition of Wednesday webinar, special Tuesday edition. Uh, Tonight, we're really happy to have Bill Young presenting. Bill has been a longtime friend, longtime member of the Society. He's a past officer, he's a past president, and is currently serving as the Society ecologist. Um, Bill is certified as a professional wetland scientist. He's a certified ecological restoration practitioner. He's got training from the Army Corps of Engineer in construction quality management. And he's, for the past 22, 23 years, been an adjunct professor at the University of Pennsylvania, where he teaches ecology at the graduate school. So tonight he's going to tell us about some of the great restoration work he's done. Bill, take it away.
Okay.
Share your screen.
Ta-da. Seeing it?
There it is. Yep, you just got to go to from first slide.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. And can I turn this off? Good. I need all the room I can get. So I hope it's okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming in. I hope it's okay that I don't show myself on the screen because sometimes it covers the words and I have a lot, like my slides are very busy. So I'm just going to talk and you can jump in whenever you want. I'm very relaxed about this. And it's just a great honor to be asked by the Native Plant Society to give this lecture. And we're looking out over our career. It's like, oh my gosh, we're working on all these Superfund sites. Like we didn't really, it was just natural because we do restoration. Look at New Jersey. Like you can't even see gray. Like the New Jersey is all red. And I wonder why that is. I wonder if it was like the armpit of New York City, where all the industries and manufacturing said, let's go to New Jersey. And so all those triangles are like Superfund sites in New Jersey. New Jersey has the most Superfunds in the nation, and yet it's the fourth smallest state. Only 3 states are smaller than New Jersey. So we have more Superfunds than California. So over the years, Bob Swain, who's on this talk, he ran the Dawson Corporation. He was the owner, which then became Sumco Eco Contracting, and we started to sort of focus on all of these sites because it was really good work and it needed to be done. And Bob invested in all of us getting hazmat training. I had come from New York City from the Department of Sanitation. So when I worked on Fresh Kills Landfill and all landfills, I had to get hazmat training. You can't stand on the site unless you have that training. So I sort of, as an ecologist and a wetland scientist, I had like a little niche that I was one of the go-to people for that. And Bob, he got everybody trained so that we could restore these sites. So all of those green and red circles are sites that we've restored in New Jersey. And we're going to talk about 4 of them tonight. But the greens are ones where we work for contractors and subcontracted to do the restoration. And the red was we did the cleanup, like the remediation and the restoration. And this isn't even all of them. This is just a bunch of them. So so we're going to go through all of this. So here's our lineup. Like this is even one sheet. I think there are 3 sheets that kept going. I didn't realize it until recently how many sites were contaminated. Basically in New Jersey, it's hard to find that what's not. You look over to the right, all this manufacturing and industry, it produces waste, and the waste is contaminated. And so there weren't really a lot of laws before 1970. So these companies would just produce this stuff and, sell it, make a nice profit, and then really not clean up. And the water was free and the air was free, and it just got contaminated. Luckily, with the first Earth Day and actually with President Nixon, there was a lot of laws that said, okay, we are now going to clean it up and we're going to hold the polluters accountable. And so there's been a wonderful improvement where our sites are getting cleaned up. And like I said, Dawson Sumco has specialized in that. So here's the first site, Harrison Avenue Landfill in Camden, New Jersey. You could see Philadelphia in the background. It's right on the Delaware River and the Cooper River. It's at the confluence of the Cooper River and the Delaware River. It's an 85-acre site. Part of it is going to be in the Kroc Center, which is an amazing state-of-the-art facility with theaters and auditoriums and everything, where everybody goes for drama and dance and all this cool stuff right at the edge of the landfill. And then here you can see the landfill proper, and you can see downtown Camden in the background. The landfill closure involved excavating and redistributing about 375,000 cubic yards of solid waste and soil onto the center of the landfill, installing a passive gas venting system, constructing a 2-foot thick semi-permeable cap of clean fill, along with the establishment of vegetation. This was done by the NJDEP. They're very dedicated to this. They collected some funding. There's this thing called NRDA, Natural Resource Damage Assessment, where you try to get the polluters to pay for what they did. This was an open dump for decades, and so the poor people of local of Camden were exposed to this. So it was an unlined landfill that went from 1952 to 1971, when it was closed with a vegetative soil cover. And then there's this whole thing of sustainable remediation, which the NJDEP embraces, where they're using best management practices to have the least amount of emissions, the least amount of water issues, the least amount of air impacts. And so they're using some really good sustainable practices to make a plan that is best for the triple bottom line, right? Economy, ecology, and culture. Best for people, most affordable, and best for the earth. And so they use these, there's a lot of really good free tools out there to do it a good cleanup way. So here's a landfill closure. Here's this company, there's this unit called SURF. It's a nonprofit, sustainable remediation. And here's all the things they're doing for better end use, very good cleanup, environmental things, cleanup objectives, low emissions, using biofuels. So they ended up on the bottom with the GSR, which is green site remediation, 5% biodiesel fuel used to operate all heavy equipment, biohydraulic fluids, non-hazardous, high performance, replaced all petroleum-based, triad approach, right, which is a 3-part, in situ screening, direct push technology, and waste minimization. So here's kind of a map of the site, and we're going to go, and we're going to go from the upper right, 1, 2, 3, to the lower left. So we're going to go in order from 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the design. It was done by CDM Smith, and they had this amazing regional park, which is now going to replace this landfill. It's actually on the landfill. And what's really cool is, like, there's amphitheaters and vistas, which you can see the contours. They're raised up because it's a landfill that now have these spectacular views. So they really use the landfill as a resource, and they put this beautiful regional park in, and we built it. So the first contractor basically quit. They were driving in live stakes. They said, we don't know how to do it. They quit and left. And so the general contractor, JPC Contracting, asked Dawson at the time to come on and supervise the union crew. And so that's exactly what we did. Me and Marty McHugh and Sergio Capazzi. So we're starting on the lower right side. We're going through this habitat conservation area, and you can see the green is reforestation plantings and the blue is living shorelines. And here is this beautiful rendering of this regional park. So that's a lovely rendering. Well, now we got to build it. And there's the Kroc Center to the lower right with the ball fields. That's this state-of-the-art facility on the landfill property. So it went from this Harrison Avenue dump, the bane of the community, to being this amazing resource and benefit. And now there's a bus stop there, and they're just doing so much. So here it is being capped and graded, October 2019. They're moving around a lot of soil, passive vent system. So it's a state-of-the-art closure. The landfill's closed, signed off. Now it comes to the restoration. Can we put this beautiful regional park on the old landfill? So my job was to lay this out. All these trays of plants come in. These are trays of 50. These are plugs. We put down the soil. We put down coir matting. It holds the seed in place. So it's topsoiled, well graded, topsoiled, and then biologs and coir matting in place. And then we plant right through it. So we use like razor knives to cut through. And we have biologs at various elevations. And it's a tidal system that we're putting in. So here's a union crew. They're using wagons. You can see the Delaware River in the background. That new FAR in front of the boats is existing on the Delaware River. And that's Petty's Island in the background. If you guys know New Jersey, that's Petty's Island. So here we are in May, starting out in construction. And our job is to build this. And so here's our plan of this conservation area. So when you see me coloring it in with my pencils, those are the various habitats that we're putting on site. So we have low marsh from certain elevation. We have tidal marsh from elevation 2.5 to 3.5, scrub, shrub, wetland, and habitat conservation area. So we color these in. We basically give the consultant, which is CDM Smith, and the owner daily counts of every plant that we put in the ground. And there it is in just a couple of months before and after this beautiful tidal wetland. And we had a little nursery on site, and we used racks. And whatever plants would come out, the union crew would wait, a forklift would come, we'd put all the trays of what was going to be out for, say, that morning on that rack, and they'd put it out, and then we would only plant the plants that came out and left the rest in the nursery where it had like a plastic liner, and we'd water it. We had sprinklers going to keep the plants alive. So we would only deliver enough plants that we could do every week. We didn't want to leave them in the nursery that long, and we brought them out on site to keep the crew busy. So here's the live stakes in the living shoreline. So now we're moving downriver, down the Delaware River. That's on the left side. This is me on site in full gear. When you're working on a hazmat site, you got to wear the vest, the hard hat, steel-toed boots, long sleeves, no shorts. You know, it could be 95 degrees. No, you gotta go in the full gear. And that's kind of our niche, that we can embrace this kind of safety technology, right? Every day there's a safety meeting. You don't go work on the site until you attend the safety meeting, you get signed off. Because what if there was a hazard out there that was identified? You have to go to the meeting, and there it is. So we're moving down the shoreline. These are live stakes. They're amazing. They're willows. You bang them in the ground. They're like $3 a piece, and they become giant shrubs. Again, over the matting, so it's seeded first, and then we're building it out. So here we have the existing new FAR to the left, scrub shrub with 12 different species of trees. You could see the biologs in place, a tidal wetland, and then even lower than that, low marsh. So it's tidal every day. So obviously we're planting low marsh when the tides are out. And there's our early progress, and it grows in really well. There's the river, there's the willows growing in good. So we have shoreline protection involved, regrading and stabilizing over 3,000 feet of shoreline on the river, where municipal solid waste and soil contamination, including pesticides and PCBs, were exposed before we started, right, on the steep slopes. Now it was all cleaned up and regraded and capped. And there's a living shoreline in June, and then there it is in September. Grows really quick. We did have a little irrigation system, a temporary, like a drip irrigation, just to get it established. These are wetland plants, so they want to have wet feet. And so for about a month and change, we had a little drip line to keep them going. We don't always have that luxury. Here's the new FAR growing in. The new FAR is like the go-to plant on the Delaware River. Then we're moving to number 3, the kayak channel. So now we're moving south and east, and you can see it's a very wide tidal thing. So this is a pretty big thing. It's a kayak channel for the public. The landfill is in the foreground. You can see the holes dug for trees. Again, over matting. The matting holds the seed in place. So this has all been topsoiled. We come in, we do the topsoil, we do the seeding, we do the matting. Sometimes we do straw mulching. And then between those biologs, you can see that this is a tidal channel that's going to get built. The neighborhood in the background, which was sitting next to this dump for 35 years, they now have this regional park with a bridge, by the way. You can see the bridge in the left side with a footbridge going over into the park. So you talk about a reversal. They now have this really cool park in their backyard. So we have a broad tidal channel. There it is. You can see it's very big. There's that neighborhood in the background. There's the tidal channel. Now the tides are coming in. We took down the dam, and so now the tides are coming in, and that's the union crew that's planting. We're planting 1 foot on center, right? They're pinning down the matting. and scrub shrub habitat. So here's the kayak channel looking up, right? There's the footbridge in the background at high-ish tide. It's almost high tide here. So this kayak channel goes right out to the river. I hope we don't lose any kids. Channel goes right out to the river. There's no one collecting anybody, so I hope everything is safe. And so this is near a monitoring station. So we finish it, and now I wear a different hat, and I'm wetland monitor. And for 3 years, the contractor was responsible for monitoring. And what we did is we had 10 stations of 30-foot radius that had to collect all the data of the species, the percent cover, the condition. I took a soil sample and the survival of all these species. So I would hand in a report. I got to call it like an umpire, right? It's a ball or a strike. How is the site doing? And I had to name every species. And if there's more than 10% invasive species by cover, you're out of compliance. So you have to have 85% hydrophytes, which are wetland species, which is pretty easy in this tidal system. You can see all of these are like fac wets or obligates. They're all adapted to the wetland. But the question is, will purple loosestrife come in and Phragmites and crowd out the good natives? And here is the kayak channel now looking downstream. And that's actually the DEP. It was a video. I don't think the video is going to work, so it's no video. But it was a short video showing the DEP testing out the kayak channel. How cool is that? This is open to the public. Okay, so here we are now. We're going to go to number 4 in black. That's the fishing pond. So we're moving eastward and upward. So this is giant pond, and it's got like catfish nesting boxes. It's pretty deep, so they had to use pumps to lower the water table so that they could build this. Here's the crew. I mean, they're pouring like a channel, a concrete channel. And this is way below what the level that it's going to be. The level is going to be up in the background. Can you see my cursor? That's kind of where the level is going to be. And you can see these well points, which is pumping water 24/7 so that they can work in the dry. And we have the nesting boxes, and we have turtle basking islands. It's pretty cool. So this is a pretty big, pond. 40,000 cubic yards of solid waste was removed from this pond. So pretty big operation. And there's the union crew. They invented these little tongs because you got to put in these 2-inch plugs in the 1 foot on center. It was like, really, give me a break. So they have to bend down as much. They invented these tongs to put them in place. It was pretty cool. And the yellow star is where the fishing pond is in the aerial view. And there it is, fishing pond in 2020. So that's basically a year, not even a year after it was planted. You can see that there's still some planting in the background that's not finished. You can see that lovely footbridge that leads to the kayak channel. And so this is a fishing pond. This is where we had pretty good survival of our species. But then you can see like some species are very good at what's called persistence, right? You're putting in thousands of plants. Which ones are going to remain and spread, and which ones are going to decline? So lizard tail, which we planted a lot of, doesn't really hang around that much, and it doesn't spread that much. So you don't want to make that one of your soldiers. You want to put in a lot of sweet flag. You want to put in a lot of arrowhead. And sure enough, the Sagittaria did great. Not only is it persistent, you're going to get good value, it's also going to spread. It's going to seed in. And then below, so when you finish planting, nature takes over. You better get it right. And by the way, we're contractors. We don't pick these plants. We only pick plants if the nursery doesn't have it something and we need to do a substitution. The consultant was very good in listening to us with our suggestions. So it's kind of a design build, but that's only in certain cases. So now you see below, the second chart is top 10 volunteer species. And you have sedges coming in, smartweeds. Smartweeds come in all the time. Most of them are native, some are not. But look at number 1, various exotic grasses. And that's the Phragmites and reed canary grass and purple loosestrife. You're going to get purple loosestrife on tidal, freshwater tidal situations because you could pull it out and it's going to come in on the next tide. So the key is to plant enough of the persistent ones that are going to have good coverage to not leave bare soil that the bad guys can come in. So here we are, August 2022. Pretty good. This is where some of my monitoring. So this is our Biden Cernoa, which is the nodding beggar ticks. That's doing well. There's that big leaf. That's the Sagittaria, the duck potato. She's doing great. That's an obligate species that loves to get flooded. It loves like that muddy situation. So this is the pond that has pretty good persistence in 2022. But then in 2024, when I went back, so my monitoring was done in 22. When I went back in 24 for a site visit with my class, a field trip, there was like 15% that was original, just a rough thing. The lower zone did better under the pink. The lower zone had Nufar and Peltandra and Sagittaria and Pontedera, the pickerel weed. The lower species did well. The higher species like the bulrush, lizard tail, wild rice, hibiscus, cardinal flower. You can't find a cardinal flower there. They did not persist. And yet we planted them 1 foot on center. And here's the fishing plaza. So this is where the public comes to fish. What a beautiful little feature. Really, really nice. So here's the plant list. And here's all of the habitats along the top, and not even part of the plant list along the columns on the left side. We're not there. This is like a third of the list, but we have low marsh, tidal marsh, scrub, low wetland, high wetland, shoreline stabilization, all the different planting zones. And we had the number of plants of each species that are in each of these zones. And like I said, we would keep a daily log and tell the consultant and the contractor how many plants of each species we put in every single day. So we could see it's almost 400,000 plants in this 64-acre wetland. And I'm sorry, 64-acre landfill park. A lot of it was wetland. I would say something like 40% was wetland, and then a lot of it was upland. So there's 13 different plant communities. And here's the master plant list. So it's recorded. I'm not going to read it, but all these habitats have all these species. So we had to keep track of this, and it was quite an endeavor. But it's pretty impressive in the diversity that we're getting. Remember, this is a regional park. It's going to have playgrounds. It's going to have sensory gardens, but it's got a lot of restoration, a lot of ecological. And savannas, great grasslands with mixed tree plantings. So in October on our field trip, upper left, that's my class from Penn on a field trip in 2023. And it's just the sites coming in. There's some issues. It definitely needs some management, but it's doing very well and it's got great coverage. So we're really happy. These are cultural elements that salvaged from the city of Camden. So these are like columns from the original Camden City Hall. And there's some really cool gardens up here and some picnic areas. It's great for everybody. We have a wonderful playground. Here's my class. Hello, class 2023. You can see the river in the background. Really cool. So now we have this amazing park. It's got all the user facilities for children, for families, for picnicking, ball fields, but it also has great ecology and great wildlife habitat. And it's, I don't think it's 2 miles of trails, but it's a lot of trails. It's maybe just under 2 miles of trails, and it's right on 2 rivers. So it's really very exciting to see. And so now, former Harrison Avenue landfill is now Kramer Hill Waterfront Park. It's now a destination. It's not a place to avoid. It's a place to go to. And here's the views from the landfill. It's pretty impressive. That's the Ben Franklin Bridge. Includes features such as amphitheater, entry plaza, exercise station, fishing plaza, hiking, biking paths and trails, kayak launch, picnic area. It's amazing. So we put this thing on the map. And so this is the Kroc Center, which has like Olympic pool and theaters and all sorts of amazing things. This was a big donation from the Camden chapter of the Salvation Army, the Ray and Joan Kroc Foundation, so of McDonald's fame, state-of-the-art building that is now on our former landfill. And here is Commissioner Jeff Nash. This park represents equity and justice in the city. Residents are no longer exposed to a space where crime thrived, where illegal dumping took place daily, and where parents had to keep their kids away from this landfill. Today, it rivals any park in the state and represents the kind of investment and change that Camden deserves. Thank you, Commissioner Nash. So maybe we'll see some, this is a blue heron feeding on the Delaware, maybe this will be at our site. And he's saying, yeah, Bill, it's about time you restored this habitat. So it's very exciting because we can take these worst places and give them a new life. And what's really cool is nobody's going to build on the Harrison Avenue landfill. It's open space for life. So what a beautiful contribution to Camden, New Jersey. And thank you, NJDEP, for your dedication. All right, number 2, Horseshoe Road, Sayreville, New Jersey. Another, what do we say? What do we got here? It's contaminated. What do we got here? This is on the Raritan River. So a river runs through everything on this talk. A river runs through it. It's in Middlesex County. You could see it on the map of New Jersey in the lower left. Again, 12-acre site. It was an industrial site, been out of operation since the early 1980s after a fire revealed 70 drums containing silver cyanide, ethyl acetate, and acetronil. I can't even pronounce it. The drums caught the attention of the EPA, and by 1995, the Horseshoe Road complex was on the national priorities list. That's another word for Superfund. And so now they've embarked on this very good cleanup. Under their plan, the agency has excavated and disposed of approximately 62,000 yards of contaminated soil and debris and monitor groundwater to determine if further actions are needed. Third phase will address sediments in the adjoining marsh and river. They're taking everything out, and there's all the bad guys I'm not even going to read that were on this site right on the Raritan River. And there was so much that they built a rail spur to collect all of the excavated materials and put it in closed rail cars and took it to secure landfills. So this is me kind of showing all of the habitats that we're going to eventually do. But there's that rail spur so that you didn't have to have trucks rumbling through the neighborhood. And a truck can't really carry, they have weight limits. They can't really carry a lot of waste. Whereas a rail, 2 engines can pull, 48 cars that are closed. And one of these landfills is in Indiana. It's a hazardous waste landfill in Indiana. So very environmental that hundreds of closed train cars could safely and efficiently replace hundreds of trucks running through the neighborhood. So the EPA made a big commitment to this. So now they've excavated down, and what was once kind of scrubby forest is now marsh. This is tidal. So now it's a new situation. It's cleaned up. This is all clean soil. And we're planting salt marsh and brackish marsh. So the woodland elevations were lowered. So it's an opportunity. And so very rare to have such a broad marsh, right, for restoration. Here's a video. I don't know. I think I don't have my video. It's really cool. It shows this company. It's actually my company now, Reforestation Solutions. They're like an assembly line. They have a bag on the left side, which is plants, Spartina, and a bag on the right side, which is a fertilizer plug, like an Osmocote plug, and they like a pill. And they have a mattock. That's that digging bar, and they plant 2 foot on center, and they dig a hole. They put a pill in, and they put a plant, and it's such a high quality plant. Like I'll come behind them, you can't pull it out. They put it in really, really good. And this was a video, but I guess it's not able to be a video. And there's a Raritan River in the background. So another site where a river runs by it, runs through it. I don't know why I can't see, because it's a video, I can't change. All right, I'm going to go back to that. Sorry. A little glitch here. Because it's a video, it won't let me turn the page. Or was it? Okay. And so here it is, like months later. Salt marsh is the best. It is the default system, right? When Henry Hudson pulled into New York Harbor, there were millions of acres of Spartina salt marsh in New York and New Jersey. Most of the shoreline of New Jersey was all marsh, well into the state. And of course, now we built all of that out, so we have a little fringe. But at one point, it was marsh over like a really good part of it. So the regulators love salt marsh because that's the default ecosystem, and it's the most productive ecosystem on Earth. So there is a short time later, 2 foot on center is plenty. You don't need to go 1 foot on center because it grows like a carpet. And there's like a debris fence, right, to keep debris from coming onto the marsh. Now we're building the brackish marsh above the salt marsh. Salt marsh is in the background, and we even have a little bit of a temporary irrigation system, which we're paid for. By the way, we're working for a company called Sevenson Environmental Services. They specialize in cleanup. The EPA and the Army Corps loves them because they're very good at it. They embrace safety. They just do great work, great integrity. And they like Dawson Sumco because we often these jobs of many, many millions, but maybe there'll be $1 million of restoration. They like to hire us because, one, we do good work. And number two, if there's monitoring required, they can get that in-house and not have to hire a consultant to do that. So here we have brackish marsh, which is BM, and we have high marsh, which is HM, right? High marsh floods a couple times a month. Low marsh, which is the Spartina in the background, floods twice a day. High marsh, 2 or 3 times a month. And the brackish marsh floods a lot less. It needs high tides, like the full moons, to flood. So these are obligate plants, but it doesn't get flooded as much. So we needed the irrigation to get them going. Okay? And these are the species. Now, we use these red baskets. Remember, it's a union crew. For the high marsh, it's easy. We take 100 plugs in a basket, and 50% Spartina patens and 50% Disticlus spicata, right? The spike grass. And you put that in, and that way, whatever they pull out of the basket, they plant, and it's always going to be in the proper ratio, half and half of what belongs. But for the brackish marsh, we have different percentages. And so our rule was for a 100 plug basket, you're going to put in 19 S. patens, 19 Disticlus spicata, 28 Chenoplectus pungens, 29 robustus, and only 5 Hibiscus machiotus, because that's the ratio of a healthy brackish marsh. And so whatever they pull out of that red basket, right? They pull a basket, whatever they pull out, it's going to be right. And we're going to get the proper ratios of right here on the left side when we're done. They don't have to think about it. We had a guy in the nursery whose job was to fill the baskets with the right ratios of species. And then we have all these habitats on site. So here's a very young woodland with seed that's being done next to some pretty mature forest. So we have young woodland. This is an earlier phase that we didn't do that is now grown in a couple of years. So we have a shrub and then a young woodland, and we have the mature forest in the background. This was a channel that the Corps built. They liked this channel that was tidal. So it got some succession going on here, right? We have the early succession, we have mid-succession with this young woodland, and then we have the older, the mid to late successional that was never contaminated. So that's off-site, but it's great habitat. And bald eagles in that clump that I'm showing, that's the bald eagle nesting site that was there while we were working. There were dead fish below those trees all the time. And they actually put out, they fledged many chicks out of that nest. And then on what I'm showing now is a northern osprey nest, which we could not, it was closed and it had a hood over it because we were doing construction. Only after construction was that hood taken off, and sure enough, the ospreys came in basically overnight. Here's the doing very well. Here is the brackish marsh plantings. We even have a few acres of meadow. So we didn't do the meadow, but that was like the laydown area for all of the mobilization. And they just seeded it to a meadow. It's not great species, but it's got some good native grasses. So now we have, okay, check. We have some grassland, grass shrub, check, right? 3 to 25 years, 25 to 100 years. and then a little bit of the, younger. We don't have the final mature, but check, check, check. We have a lot of various levels. We have various sears, they're called sears, of the different succession on this one site. And you can see this bird species are tethered, right, to the different sears. So there's grassland birds that will be gone once the shrubs, once the woody plants come in. And then there are mature birds, mature species birds, mature forests that only come in after a certain level of succession. So even though it's off-site, right, the birds don't read the papers, they're using our site, and we have all sorts of the different successional sears working in our favor, on-site and off-site. So it's a pretty cool, for a Superfund site, it's a pretty cool site that I feel bad because it's not open to the public yet. It's all done. We were done a couple of years ago. It's not open to the public. It's right on the Raritan River. You can go fishing for striped bass. You can go kayaking. For some reason, EPA is still closed, and it's the wildlife. There's no people there. Every time I go there, the wildlife is all over the place. This is my friend Blaine Rothhauser. I hope he's on tonight. He's out of state somewhere doing this amazing work for L'Oreal, but he took this photo, and any good photo in this talk is probably from Blaine. This was a site we worked on, another contaminated site right across the river in Keysby. And this was like the bird, the northern flicker. We adopted her because she nested right in a kind of an older tree, right, that you can carve out a hole like that, and nested and fledged her chicks. And he like hid under a hood to try to get that photo. So even forest interior birds, right, where they should do much of their feeding, they do depend on forest openings. So they might be interior birds that they're going to use those gaps for feeding. The eastern towhee requires young forest. We got young forest on site. Her population has declined 90% since the 1960s. Where's her habitat, right? She needs habitat. So we have myriad habitats on site. There's the marsh in the background. That's a deer fence. So the black fence is a deer fence because they browse on the woody plants. We had goose fence on the herbaceous plants outside, and we have these lovely habitats that are all coming in, on this former Superfund site. So it's pretty cool. We got some pretty good diversity, and on both sides, off-site, the 80-year plus climax forest. It's not our site, but the birds don't care, right? They're using it. Is there enough interior forest? No, it's patchy, but not bad. This site, though, is the poor people of Sayreville. They deserve to have this open, please. So here's our interior forest birds. And there's all the species, right? Not just birds. They're all species, and they're struggling because we have such a modified, such a carved up habitat with our suburban lifestyle. They lost their interior forest, which the Jefferson salamander and other salamanders need, right? And they also need vernal pools. So the cottontail requires shrublands. We got shrublands on site. Maybe they'll be there someday. It's pretty cool. The cottontail has lost 80% of its habitat because we don't have those early successional sites, because we don't have fire ecology anymore. We're putting out fires. Smoke at the Bear, no fire. So we're the Northeast, anything east of the Mississippi River, when it's abandoned farmland, it's growing back into forest. So it's a short period of grassland and early shrub habitat, and then it goes into woodland. And so they're losing that habitat. So 2.2 acres of salt marsh, brackish marsh above that, then young woodland. And how cool is this? This is a great egret using our debris fence to trap all these fish. Talk about adaptation. Cool is that? So there's Blaine taking a photo of us. And he took all these photos. That's the young bald eagles that were fledged. And there's the mom or dad on the right side of the bald eagle, the mature bald eagle. So thank you, Blaine. And here we are in our gear. We went to do a little modest replanting. And here we are in our gear working on the site. And there's terrapin, diamondback terrapin on this beautiful site on the river. Still not open to the public. Thank you, Blaine. That's a gorgeous photo. So here's this continuum, right? We have reduced impacts, remediation. That's what this talk is about. Remediation, rehabilitation, and then ecological restoration. We believe in this. Ecological restoration works. Clean the site up, make it healthy, clean air, clean water, take away the disturbance, take away the contamination. The wildlife will come back. All we do is jumpstart it. We jumpstart it and we get it going and we step back and nature does the rest. But give her half a chance. And all these urban sites, they come back to life. All right, we're on the third site. How am I doing for time? I hope I'm behaving. This is South Wilmington wetlands. So sorry, I jumped over the state line into South Wilmington, very close to New Jersey. August 2009, this is Google Earth. Abandoned industrial site turned into a Phragmites monostand. South Wilmington Wetland Park, right on the Christina River. Excavation and disposal of 17,000 tons of PCB and metals, right? Excavation and disposal of 155,000 yards of soil unsuitable for reuse. On this job, we worked for Diamond Materials. We were the subcontractor doing the planting, and you can see down here, 113,000 emergent marsh plants, 1,700 native shrubs, and 800 native trees. So here we are planting. They put this beautiful boardwalk on the right. The boardwalk now connects Southbridge neighborhood, which is kind of a food desert, across the way to good shopping. There's like a shop right there where there's healthy food. And we're planting, and we're sort of working for the contractor, and parts of it weren't done. So they're like, hurry up and wait, and you got to go and plant. But they didn't have the river connected yet. They're going to bring the river water in. So we have obligate plants thirsty, sitting here waiting for water, right? We're planting in the dry, waiting for the river to come in. All these zones, we have a submergent zone, emergent zone, wet meadow, floodplain, upland zone. We have several forested wetlands here. So here's a site during construction. You can see that line is going to be the boardwalk that connects the neighborhood to the lower right over to good shopping on the upper left. And you can see downtown Wilmington is the skyline over there to the right. And those dots there, that's our shrub planting. That's and these are the channels that's going to get filled up with the river that used to flood the Southbridge neighborhood down here. We're not going to collect the water, right? The boardwalk traverses the site, linking the community to food. And now the water comes in, and finally the plants get a drink of water, and they made it. And here's that beautiful state-of-the-art boardwalk that connects, it's like crossing the site. And here's all these various wetland habitats that we planted, and now we connect to the river. Here's the Christina River. Here's the Southbridge neighborhood that used to flood in the smallest storm. Now we have a wetland. We like water. We welcome. So they engineered pipes and valves. They have valves that open up and let in the river water. And now the river runs through it. You can see the various habitats in here. In this neighborhood, now it doesn't flood. The water comes in where it belongs. So here is an aerial view of the completed site. You can see all the wetland habitats. There's soccer fields here. We took this brownfield abandoned industrial site and turned it into another regional park. Again, it'll never be built on. It's a beautiful asset to the neighborhood. Now a river runs through it. So this neighborhood that used to flood no longer floods, and the residents are very happy, and they have some environmental justice. So it's more than a recreational, it's an award-winning green infrastructure solution that uplifts the Southbridge community of Wilmington, Delaware. Will restore and enhance 14 acres of wetlands, including stormwater. 1 acre of wetland can filter 7.3 million gallons of water a year. So they're just scrubbers, and it's great for the air, and it's great for water quality, and it's great for wildlife. Last one, we're going to go up to South Plainfield, New Jersey, Cornell de Billier Electronics Superfund, another hazmat site. Imagine that. So there it is, the black star on the Bound Brook. Literally, a river runs through it, and you can see the site in New Jersey. That's where it is, in Middlesex County. What do we got here? Oh, it's PCBs, lead, solvents, you know, the usual. So this is a 2010. You could see the industrial site is still there. It's a pretty big site, and they just built, these electronics, and all this waste got into the creek got into the soil. It's just contaminated everything. So it became a Superfund. The EPA sort of shuts down the operation and then says, okay, we're going to fund this. Hopefully we can get the polluter, which would be Cornell Dubilier Electronics, get them to pay for this, or at least pony up some money, and then we'll use the NRD funds to clean the site up because it cost a lot of money. So what did Cornell Dubilier make? They made capacitors. So Eric Clapton can play his electric guitar. The problem is a capacitor, which is a pretty small device, there's so much waste for some little piece. There's a lot of waste, and that waste, this is before there were laws, it just got into drums or into the soil or into the river. So it's a 26-acre facility from 1936 to 62, and it was converted to an industrial park. PCBs and solvents were used in the manufacturing process, and the company disposed of it at the facility, contaminating soil, groundwater, and nearby areas, including Bound Brook. There are 4 phases to this. We're working on 2 of them. The first one is thanks for the capacitor, but don't forget to clean up. Thank you, Eric. Right? So, by the way, they ponied up and got 152 million. 4 million of it came from damages from Cornell Dubilier, and these are their products. They're still in business. A lot of these companies go out of business, and so they can no longer get the polluter to pay because they're defunct and they're out of business. So responsible parties, number 4, those liable for the release of hazardous are often required to compensate for their damages. This can include funding the restoration efforts or paying for the assessment. I'd like to say that New Jersey is one of the leading states in getting the polluters to pay for their problems. So if you know anything about the BP oil spill, all of the federal officials, they're called, they basically got together and said to BP, okay, you did all these damages to the Gulf of Mexico, which the citizens of the United States deserve to have a healthy Gulf of Mexico. You're going to pay for those damages. Guess what it came out to be? Every oiled bird, every dead fish, every business that lost, their little bungalows on the shoreline, that lost their rentals because of an oiled, beach, and it was no tourism. The total damages were $19 billion. And Marty McHugh, who I work with, who started the NRD program in New Jersey DEP, went down to Louisiana to help negotiate that settlement. So that Marty's an attorney. How cool was that? But New Jersey is very proactive. We chase after the polluters, we make them pay, we close these sites, and we clean them up for the good people of New Jersey. So here's a site before in 2018. There's the river. You can see the paved area, that's the gray. That's phase 1. That was where the manufacturing was. It was so bad it just paved over, and it has like a water treatment system. And you can see the yellow arrow is where they went through this kind of 3-phase water treatment system, and then it would discharge into this basin. And then in our phase, they actually built a plant that's on site to this day treating wastewater. And they just ripped all of this up. They literally rebuilt the river. They dug up all the sediments, and they're going in the direction of the arrows downriver. That's the Bound Brook, and it goes all the way through to Piscataway, all the way to Bound Brook, New Jersey, down, and it meets up with the Raritan. So this is an amazing site in South Plainfield, New Jersey. So this is where we come in. So this is another Sevenson site. Sevenson is doing the cleanup. They lay down the base soil, and then we come in. That red thing is a pump. The river comes into the red thing, into that pump, and then it goes through this black pipe. The entire river goes through this pipe and discharges past the job. So we're basically pumping around the river. It's called a pump around, so that we can build the river, that we can build the site without flooding. So remediation, grading, then 1 foot of topsoil, and then Sumco comes in to do seeding, planting, fencing, and then monitoring, my little specialty. So here's kind of the map. It was made by Arcadis, working for the Army Corps. By the way, the EPA manages the project. They fund it. The Army Corps works for the EPA to build the site and work on the construction of it. So they're on the implementation end. They're on site in a trailer every day. So the Army Corps works with the EPA partners to build the project, and then the contractor works obviously with the Army Corps to do this. So these are 5 habitats: grassland, emergent zone, upland, and palustrin forest and shrubland on this site. And they have to have, for compliance, for the permits, they have to have a certain amount of plants and stem counts and good wetland plants, right? That will delineate as wetland. So we have emergent wetland with a lot of plugs, a lot of plants, 16,200. Palustrin forest #1, a lot of riparian. Palustrin means wetland, like a wetland forest. Palustrin forest 2, upland forest, because there's some slopes, and then lower and upper shoreline stabilization. So along the river, I love it. They used live stakes and willows and live plants rather than riprap. Then we have shrublands, and we have steep slope upland meadow, and that's all the number of plants. And that's the palustrin zones 1 and 2. You see there's a lot of overlap, but these are wet trees that love to get flooded, okay? When the topsoil's down, we come in right on top of it. So here we are in May 2021, putting down approved seed mix. Everything is done. Oh my God, everything is approved. You don't do anything without an approved schedule, approved plant list, approved nurseries, and all the personnel. These are union personnel and some of our crew. Here we are planting the first palustrin forest. There's a river in the background. There's a bound brook. Those large trees are offsite. So our site is fenced in. We want to keep the deer out. There's tons of deer around here. They walk right down the river and laugh at us. Put up this fence, put in many trees of these kind of palustrin species. And then you could see that we have a lot of plugs in the emergent zone. Woody plants are in containers. So there's thousands of them, basically 22,300 plants. We make a little nursery. There's the pots. These are 7-gallon or number 7 size trees, and then smaller shrubs in a little nursery. So we fence it in. We put sprinklers here. Sevenson gives us a hose bib, and we water the trees. So we put in enough trees to keep the crew busy, but not that many trees that we have a permanent nursery. This is a temporary nursery. We are contractors. We're not good nursery people. And the plants are adapted to the conditions. It floods here. We like flooding. So we have Acer saccharinum, silver maple. You can see, and this is a great book. This is called Plants for Stormwater Design. It takes flooding, but not forever. Who did that? What's going on here? Oh my gosh, who did that? It takes flooding, but not forever. About 20 days, you better stop flooding. It drains. It's meant to late winter, spring, it floods, but then it goes away. And it's a wet tree that can take very high flooding, 60 inches of flooding, but not forever. On the right is sweet flag. That's one of the emergent zone plants, Acarus americanus. That can take some flooding, but it can stay flooded forever. So that shows it going forever. That's an obligate species that is sitting in water. It likes to be flooded, and it's adapted to it. Look at how it's grown in 1 year. There's a south view over T4. That's a transect, that white PVC pole. I monitor that within a 37-foot radius every year, right? That's T4. And there's that same one. You can't even see the PVC pole anymore a year later in 2023. So these palustrin forests have grown in, really amazing. The willows have done well. The sycamores, oh my gosh, they're like 19 feet tall. They just went bonkers. This is Eastern sycamore, Platanus occidentalis, one of the great riparian species. So we have a young forest, we have the emergent zone in the foreground, and then that's offsite is the large trees in the background. But there's a seed rain coming in. There's a lot of oaks and maples. There's a seed rain coming in and enriching the site. We have live stakes that are here. This is black willow. These live stakes, you drive them in the ground and they become shrubs. They went nuts. They outgrew some of our trees. So the willows are amazing, and it's a great value, and it beats rock riprap. Thank you, Army Corps. Thank you, EPA, for not putting riprap here. Look at the willows. They're just going bonkers in a couple of years. So this is called the upper and lower bank stabilization right along the Bound Brook Creek. And it's all fenced in. We have our palustrin zones all growing in. Well, in 2021, beavers found our site, and we're now, no, we're not even there anymore. And they chewed down 38 trees in a couple of days. So I went down to do some like quarterly monitoring. I'm telling Sevenson, oh my gosh, we lost a lot of trees. And they were just doing their thing, doing what beavers do. Lighten up, dude. This is just us doing our thing. They never did build a dam, and we didn't know what to do, but they ended up leaving. Well, we didn't get penalized for dead sprouts because they were chewed by beaver. But guess what? They came back. This is now a swamp white oak that was chewed and it came back. It's pretty good to see. So it's very forgiving. So here's our palustrin forest. And now we have not just succession, now we have all the mycorrhiza, the below ground ecosystem going on, right? If you build it, they will come. The mycorrhiza, we did put mycorrhiza in, but it's going to build on its own. And I've been reading a lot about this now. The mycorrhiza is like for everyone. It's like a shared root zone down there. It's like this dense root zone. So if there's like a plant that's struggling, do you know the mycorrhiza kind of help it out and give it food and will favor it and help it recover? Like, this is some really good work. I forget the lady who was just on a podcast, A Great Simplification. Suzanne is her name. She's doing great work in the Pacific Northwest on how mycorrhiza are like the mother tree is like helping out the whole ecosystems. So now we're not single plants, we're not even woodland. Now we're in forest where all these dynamics are building in. Now we have to guarantee the plants. The plants that die, out of pocket, we have to replace. So here's the palustrin zone 1, we only lost 5. Here's palustrin zone 2, we lost 6. Spicer Avenue, we lost 4. But look at the upland, we lost 29 trees. We have to replace those. So it was a total of 89 trees in all the various ecosystems and 15 shrubs. And that's out of pocket. And it's kind of hard with planting during summer, out of planting season. But because of permits and schedules, this is a hazmat site. You have to go and do the work. You can't wait until fall. So we lost a lot and we have to go and replace these. But out of 1,908 trees and shrubs planted, right, we have only a 5.6% loss. And by the way, as contractors, we build that in. If you're under 10% on your guarantee replacement, that's not bad. You build it into your profit, right? That you're going to have some costs. We're planting in the middle of summer with minimal watering, manual watering. That's not too shabby. Here's the emergent zone. Lovely list. We have everything gets seeded and then everything gets planted. So there's always a seed mix as the carpet below. In this case, we straw mulched it, but because there's flooding here, it's going to wash away. This is totally, emergent zone is going to flood like during even a modest storm. So a lot of these species are also in the seed mix. So there's redundancy here. And you put down this carpet. And I know I'm jumping ahead a couple of years, but now it's like hibiscus heaven, right? New species emerge. We have really good persistence, better than Harrison Avenue, really good persistence with the plants that we put in and seeded. Good natives and some introduced have come in. Here's a lovely sedge meadow. Sedge meadow is great for rare wetland birds. Snakes and invertebrates can be found in remnant sedge meadow. Right here, sensitive fern grows among various sedges and grasses. So we have great sedge meadow. We have great wet meadow in this emergent zone. So here's sneezeweed, New York ironweed, Vernonia noveboracensis. This came out of the seed mix. And the Army Corps is like, Bill, go out and seed. I don't see anything. Bill, go out and seed. And we're like, no, it takes a couple of years for these herbaceous species to come in. They put down root first, and then they put up their stems. New England aster is one of my favorites, a fall bloomer. So I do my monitoring. I have goldenrod. I have all the asters that are blooming, and I love it. Many species of bees will, if you build it, right? The insects are the foundation of the food web. Put in the native plants. This is our buddy, Doug Tallenby. Put in the native plants, and the wildlife comes in. Insects are bird food. Feed the insects, give them something to eat, pollinator host plants, and here we go. A native carpenter bee and a European honeybee, nectar on swamp milkweed. We have tons of swamp milkweed there. The meadows feed the insects. Insects are bird food. The food web builds and builds. We get complexity and diversity as it grows in. There's my monitoring poles, by the way. So here's a close-up of New England aster. That's in the T9 zone. And there is a bumblebee on, I think that was Helianthus. And here is our seaside goldenrod, which came in very nicely. And there's a sneezeweed again. And there's Joe Pyeweed. This is Eutrochium maculatum. We also have boneset. So the most important living being on the planet, my wife thinks it's me. It's not. It's a bee. So the Royal Geographic Society, the Earthwatch Institute, declared bees as the most important living beings on the planet. Amen to that. I'll take it. And we have tons of bees here. Now we get to monitoring. So the big circles are 37.2 foot radius. There's 10 of them around this whole site. They're representative, right? That's where I'm doing my monitoring. Anything outside that is not getting accounted for. But boy, there's a lot of circles there. And then the smaller circles, the green ones, are an 11.7 foot radius. Those are called minor transects. The major transects, 1 to 10, and the MTs, the minor transects, are 1 through 15. That's mostly herbaceous. The transects, the Ts, are mostly trees. So we're looking for 85% survival, 85% hydrophytes, right? Wetland species, less than 10% invasive species, hydric soils, and indicators of hydrology. So that's my map. I go out to these poles and I mark it up. So the minor transects, you can see sort of the black line. I name everything that's in there. I take a photograph, and that's the data I take. So it's like 100% cover, made up of what percentage of each species. So before I start, I'll say, oh, it's about 103% cover. Then I do all of the, just visual, all of the species by cover. But then at the end, if I said there was 103% and it adds up to 110, I got to bump a few down. If I add it up, it's up to 98, I got to bump a few up. In other words, I work backwards from the initial assessment of the total coverage. The major transects, there's 10 of them, 37.2 foot radius. Not only do I name every layer, right? We have the ground layer, we have the shrub layer, we have the canopy layer. I name every plant in every layer, and then I have to measure the trees and give their condition. So it's a lot of work. So there's another video that isn't going to work that is meant to say, okay, I take the tree every year. So if I find AR2 from last year, I measure it again. I say, all right, last year it was 11.4 feet in height, and now it's 13.1 feet. So it grew a couple. So now we could see, here's AR2. It's the second Acer rubrum I found, AR2. The next AR I find is going to be AR3 in the transect. It's in poor condition, right? There's no leaves here. There's some leaves. It's alive, but it's in poor condition. It's supposed to be a tree, and it's 10.1 foot high. Next year, I'm going to come in and I'm going to see how this guy is doing. So it's year to year. And I see every time I get to a video, okay, no, it does it. Okay. And so here's the transects 1 to 10. So many are excellent. So many are good. So many are fair, poor, dead. Now I have an asterisk here. Notice there's 0 dead. That's because we already did the replacements. The 89 replacements were before the monitoring began. So it looks like we did really well. But so we leave the dead ones in place, by the way, because they're great habitat value. So here's the totals. And there's the average heights of the trees in inches of these 10 transects in 2022. In 2023, I do the same thing. We see how many excellence, fair, poor. Is it, what's the trend? Is it doing better or worse? And are the trees growing in? And then I have these monitoring reports. So we go over them, and you go through the site, and you give the Latin long, and this is T1. Here's the date. Who's the guy? W. Young, that's me. It goes to the Army Corps of Engineers. Is it hydrophytic vegetation present? I put an X there, yes. Is hydric soil present? Yes, X. And is wetland hydrology present? And so this first sheet is hydrology. You check off all the indicators, and it automatically will check whether it's a wetland. So I didn't put this X in. When I did this, it put it in for it. Then we go over the vegetation. Within this, how many are in the tree stratum? Well, 0, because they're not big enough yet, right? They're sapling there's definitions of what is shrub sapling size. I start typing it in, it automatically fills it in. So something like cephalus, once I start typing ceph, it does the rest. It tells me it's an obligate, a fact wet, and then it goes over and does all the math of whether it's a wetland or not. It's really cool. So if you're dominated by wetland plants, which we are, these are all fact wet and obligates, every one of them is, this is a no-brainer that it's going to be a wetland. And it automatically, so is hydrophytic vegetation present? There it is on the bottom. Heck yeah, it's a yes. And that goes into my report. There's 3 sheets: hydrology, this one, vegetation, and soils. And you check the plant, you go on the USDA database, and it tells you hit wetland. So see wetland, I hit wetland, and it's going to tell me if Panicum diconthiflorum is it a fact wet, is it a fact up, is it a fact, and I write that in. So I tag wetland and tells it. For soils, I dig a bunch of holes, and I check with this Munsell book. I literally see that little hole there. You put the soil behind it, and you see which color it matches up with. The colors to the left are faded. See, the oxygen's faded out, so they're gleyed. Colors to the right are orangey and brown. They're oxidated, so they're not wetland soil. The ones to the left are more wetland, and I just call it like an umpire, find the color that matches, and the chroma of 2 or less and a value of 4 or more in the matrix will be a wetland soil. So you have to have all 3 to have wetlands. Okay, hydrology, soils, and vegetation. And then I make a list. These are all the transects. Now it's sorted. Now I'm using a filter and sorting, and I have frequency. How many times does it show up? Remember, there's only 10 transects, so 9 times. The Eupatorium serotinum was in 9 of the 10 transects. The Panicum virgatum, which was in, we seeded it and planted it. P means it was planted, is in 7 of the 9. So frequencies, how many times does it show up? But here's the percent cover. So this was sorted by cover, sorted down. So the number 1 was the late flowering thoroughwood, number 2, number 3. Now you see the red is the bad guys. That's the invasive species. Again, I call it like an umpire. Of all of them, it showed up in 6. The mugwort is all over. Showed up in 6 of them, and it's 33% total cover. Now, we're doing ongoing management, so we're trying to knock this percentage down. So the report goes to my buddy Craig, and he comes out with a rig and sprays it and gets the mugwort down and the Chinese bush clover, lady's thumb and ragweed. He tries to knock these down, so we'll be in compliance. So here's all of this, all of the things with their wetland indicator, with the percentages total. We have tremendous coverage because it's layered. We have shrub layer and we have ground layer. So it's like 120% by the time you add it all up. And the red being, so each one, so you have 19% of T4, 19% is invasive. So that's over the limit because we have ragweed here, we have mugwort, and we have bush clove, a pretty high percentage. And there's the total. So the total is 18%. There's our site. There it is. We have really good persistence of our planted species and our seeding species. And then we have a bunch that came in. 15 are native species, 17 introduced. They're not invasive, introduced, but they're enriching our biodiversity. Remember, our insects are tethered right to these various species, and 7 invasive. It's not exact. And the birds, every year the birds come in. I have a Merlin, I'm not a great birder. I have a Merlin app, and I'll be doing my monitoring. I literally leave it right there, and she listens for sounds and tells me the birds, pretty accurate. And I write it down. So T4, I got all these birds. T5, I got all these birds. And there's amazing bird diversity that's there like overnight. So there's a white-eyed vireo, feeds a drab prominent caterpillar to its young. The caterpillars, the insects, are bird food. So here's my buddy Blaine. I love this graph. We're starting, synanthropic on the left is close to man. And these are common species like deer and chipmunks and stuff that we see all the time. On the right side is apoanthropic, away from man, wilder species, rarer species that you don't see that are here on the right, the owl and the scarlet tanager. Our job is to move that cursor to the right, okay? A contaminated site is way to the left. We're going to try to move it to the right, away from man and toward wild. And so there's the arrow, right? Can we move it there? And what's really cool is once you build it, with every year, the arrow moves further to the right. It's really exciting to see. We're just jump-starting nature. Here's my boy Ptolemy. These are most of the Lepidoptera. They just need a handful of native species. The Salix, the Prunus, the Pinus, the Populus, and the Quercus. The oak is the king, right? So this is a few keystone plant genera support the majority of Lepidoptera. Guess what? We got most of these on our site, on this hazardous waste site at Superfund. There they are, most of the big 14, right? The big 14, we have them on site. Here's the willow, number 2 on our list. It's just a machine supporting all this wildlife, mostly insects. This one species supports 440 species of Lepidoptera. And there's a lot in the soil. So this is Blaine's TRBA, Terrestrial Rapid Bioassessment. And he puts a tarp over his van and puts a light and basically names every Lepidoptera that comes there. They can't help themselves. They come to that canvas and he documents them. And we have all these habitats. He can give you an accurate assessment in one night of the Lepidoptera that are on site. They can't help coming to the light. That's how they navigate. And so he's got this great list. So we're building this up. Look at the decline in birds. So anything to the left is declining. Anything to the right are bird species that are gaining and improving. So a lot of species are doing well, but a lot of species, especially the red, a lot of species are doing very poorly. We are losing our habitats. We have climate change. We have all these impacts. So, oh my gosh, to bring something back, what a joy, right? To bring something back, what a joy. So thank you for listening. I'm ready to take questions. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you, Army Corps of Engineers, Kansas City District, EPA. They're on site for an inspection. This is the river runs through it. This one, the next phase, it's got too much riprap. So sorry about that. They didn't use as much willows on this site. So thank you very much. Should I unshare my screen?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you can stop sharing now.
Okay.
And
oh, there we go. Thank you. Some of the most polluted and toxic sites have now new life. And thank you, Bob Swain. Right? Or Sinatra. I can make it there. I can make it anywhere. So thank you, New Jersey and New York.
Proud to be a Jersey resident.
Right. How cool to get river otters if we could get them back in Camden, right? At the
That would be cool.
It would be amazing. This is what I live for. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Yeah, we got questions. You know
Can I
what?
go to the chat? Oh, here's Q&A.
Questions are in the Q&A. One of the questions always comes up with this, like, so they took out, you said one place they even put in a railroad to haul out all the contaminated soil.
Yeah.
Where does it go?
So, and that was one of the questions, the first question. No, we're not taking the waste and we're putting it in a secure landfill. Yes, it's still a landfill, but it's a place that's state of the art, that gets capped. It's overlooked by the EPA or whatever the state agency. It's very expensive. So, but it was so contaminated, it has to leave the site. Certain lightly contaminated things you can treat in place, you can modify it, and it can be capped in place. But this place, it goes to another landfill, but it's state of the art and it's cleaned up and it's secure and it gives jobs. One of the sites is called Heritage. It's in Indiana. A lot of this waste from Horseshoe Road went to Canada, so different places. But it went by rail, so it didn't go, diesel fumes going through neighborhoods, and it went to these secure sites.
Well, I mean, it depends on what the contaminant is too.
Yes.
I think some of them, we have a Superfund site right here where I live, and it was recently cleaned up and was hauled somewhere in New York where they basically they process it, they cook it, because the chemicals are volatile, and then you can absorb them in activated carbon and that. But yeah, some things are just going to be placed someplace that has a cap on the bottom and top, and it's just there forever.
Yeah. So should I just answer these?
No, let me curate them a little.
Okay.
Um, so one of the things was, I think you mentioned that like the plants, like you didn't have a lot of choice over the plants; they were already selected for you.
Correct. And the designer, which was Arcadis, was very gracious when he saw that I have a couple of years of experience in Bob Swain and the reputation of Dawson and Sumco. We partnered as we went along. And it was important because some of the species weren't available. Some were like at Harrison Ave, they were the wrong name. They didn't have the right name. So we tried to very gently kind of steer them in a better direction. And as we built a reputation, we kind of became more partners with Arcadis and with CDM Smith.
And of course, you're always shooting for native species.
Oh, no, this is the EPA. There's no option here. There's no non-natives. There's zero non-natives allowed. And one of the questions was local ecotype. We go as local as we can. Absolutely. Local as we can. We love Pinelands Nursery. That's our go-to place. We get millions of plants from Pinelands.
Okay. So somebody asked, like, you notice like some of the species, and I've seen this in my own yard. I planted a whole tray of one species and it all disappeared. So why is that, some things they're selected, right, as being a good species to plant, but yet they disappear.
Yeah. So Harrison Ave, we put in 1 foot on center, which is to me overkill. Like cardinal flower, iris, it didn't persist. Dirty water coming in. It's got competition from a lot of things. So we did not have good persistence of certain species. And other ones, we call them soldiers because you put them in, not only do they persist, they grow and they send out seeds. So a good designer has to know what the soldier plants are. They're not equally distributed. If there's 15 species, they're not 1/15th for each species. Some are going to be 40%, 20%, 17, 12%. You're going to put them in the way they occur in nature. You don't see cardinal flower 80% cover. Like it's kind of going to have a small role in the plant community. Lizard tail did not do well. It didn't persist. Great to have, but I'm not going to put it in equal proportion to Peltandra or Pontidaria or duck potato. Like, no way.
Somebody asked about difficulty getting plants. You just mentioned that. Like sometimes, they say that we should plant X, Y, and Z, but you just can't get them, right? That's
So great question. And the nurseries are just begging to know what you want us to plant. So let's say someone puts out a job and they want wild rice. Well, wild rice is an annual. It's not even grown in a nursery, but it's on a design. So a good designer will do their homework to find out what's available and or contract grow. We worked on Fountain Avenue and Penn Avenue landfills in New York City, and the designer of that, John McLaughlin of the Deep, for 5 years, he contract grew exactly what he wanted at 4 different nurseries. So he'd get the diversity and he'd get the plants in 5 years what he wanted. So planning goes a long way.
Yeah, and we learned that with our independent garden center initiatives that the garden centers they get the plants from a wholesaler, the wholesaler gets the plugs from somebody that grows from seed, and it's a whole chain of supply,
Right.
and
And,
you
and
can't just say, oh, I want this tomorrow.
right. And is
You
it
have
the
to know
chicken
a
or
year.
the egg? People only ask for these species. No, they ask for those species because that's all you have. So then the growers keep giving them more of that. So we have the big 8 of everyone getting the same thing. Chicken or the egg? No, we're trying to introduce, and the Native Plant Society has been really proactive to try and introduce native species. And guess what? The people will buy them. They'll even pay a premium because they want them. So the next thing is to get the big retail stores to hold more natives. And guess what? They're gonna sell. And then they're gonna get more species and more species. But you have to have the demand there. And I think the demand is there.
You mentioned that, some of the, you go into, well, you do your monitoring. Somebody asked, is like maintenance included? Is that part of the monitoring? I mean, you mentioned replacing things after the first year.
Well, guarantee is one thing. That means if you don't have a guarantee, the contractor could just not care about the plants and just throw them on the ground and say, sorry. The guarantee is a good thing. It's an insurance policy that you're going to plant them right and you're going to care for them. Some projects, good ones, build in management. You don't even call it maintenance, you call it management. It's adaptive management. What invasives are going to show up? You don't know. So you want to have an escrow account available for spraying or some kind of treatment that you might have to do. We had temporary irrigations. Most jobs do not. When you're working on 18 acres, 27 acres, you're not going to have irrigation. That's a luxury we don't have. Fortunately, native plants are adapted to the site. So maybe a little tent, you go with a watering truck and you get them going. But definitely watering, at least for the first 4 weeks, is critical because that's the establishment period. Then after that, you can back off. But a good contract has management built in. And so for Sevenson working on Cornell, we have quarterly reports. I go in and I make a quarterly report and I say, okay, this fencing's down. We better fix that. And they pay my company to fix the fencing. We have some mugwort coming in. We better take care of that. We have some erosion over here. We better take care of that. And they have this slush fund that is funding to get a crew back to do the management. And then after 3 years, the site is pretty self-sustaining, one would hope.
You mentioned some of the invasives that you went in and sprayed them. Is that basically the only alternative? I would imagine
Right.
you can't be pulling them out by hand.
So here we are talking to the Native Plant Society, which is like the garden, the gardening people. And I'm not a fan of spraying. I'm not a fan at all. It's the last thing I want to do. And I believe that Monsanto is evil. And I think that there's cancer upticks because of I'm terrible. But if you're managing a site and it's 100 acres and you got Phragmites and you got to put Spartina in, you want to dig it out by hand, knock yourself out. You can't have a big enough crew to do it. Labor is a huge cost. We worked in the Meadowlands and they literally sprayed by helicopter. And they took Phragmites, which is caused by man, disturbing, building turnpikes, changing the hydrology, contaminating things. Phragmites loves disturbance, and it comes in 100 acres, was all Phragmites. They sprayed it, and then they regraded it, and they dug some channels and let the salty water come in, and we planted Spartina. Without spraying, job doesn't get done. Then you hope the Spartina alterniflora will hold its own in the Meadowlands, which is not really salty. Spartina is salt tolerant. It needs salt to outcompete the Phragmites, which is kind of becoming more salt tolerant. So little by little, this Phragmites is cheating back. Purple loosestrife, you can get the beetle. That's a home run. You don't have to spray. You put a couple beetles out there and it will eat. So they took the beetle from the purple loosestrife homeland in Eurasia. They brought a natural predator to America, and you put a few out there and it worked great. So you want to try to use biological controls wherever you can. There's going to be some parasite, there's going to be some predator that you can bring in, but they have to test that because they don't want the beetle for the purple loosestrife to jump on the native plant and start eating that. You don't want to mess with it. So spraying is probably the number one go-to, and you want to be very surgical and spray just on the bad guys if you can. Whatever the spray hits, it stops photosynthesis, right? So you're killing that plant. And you're doing a favor because the plants that are adjacent can fill that void. And now you have the natives, and it's harder for the plant to come back because there's no openings, there's no bare soil. So I would say treatment, minimal possible, to get the natives to be sustainable.
Someone asked, can you say anything more about the biologs? I think that.
Yeah. So biolog is made from coir. Coir is a product of coconut. And so it comes from Sri Lanka and it comes from India. And the coconut, the core, is the longest lasting natural fiber. So instead of using plastic matting, which snakes get stuck in, it's the worst. Core acts as a really good mulch. It holds down a seed, it stops erosion, and it even adds a little moisture, right? And suppresses weeds. A biolog is core packed into a sausage. So think of a 20-foot log, and it comes in different diameters, and it's got like a netting, and you pack the core into the netting to either be 20-foot by 12-inch diameter or 18-inch diameter. And they make a good toe. So if you're backfilling, or if you want to have kind of like some erosion control reinforcement, the biolog, and you stack them log to log. So 20 foot, and then you butt the next one next to it, and you can go all the way down river. 600 feet, you go down river with biolog. So that was the living shoreline. Instead of rock, you use biolog. The regulators love it because it decomposes, it's natural, and you could even put plants in it. It's a pain. You got to take like a razor, sharp thing, and dig a hole. The core is very dense, and you put in a plug, and it grows right in the core. In fact, at the nursery, they use core for growing material. So it's a great product to use, and it's very natural, and it's better than rock.
And can they put like fertilizer in there or mycorrhiza or other kind of things like that?
I've never done that. I've never put micro. It's hard enough getting the plug in. The plug has got this kind of thick. The crew hates it because you're making a hole, but the hole, like so it's hard to get it planted. So, but it's a good technique. It's a very good technique.
Um, you mentioned the tidal zones, right? So that the Delaware is a tidal river.
Freshwater tidal.
Freshwater, but so is there any consideration when these things are designed that maybe 10, 20, 30 years down the road, the river is going to be a foot, 2 foot higher?
It's a great question. And I would say that that's the question of the day. The answer is, I'm just a contractor. I'm building these things. So I don't really get to say where the train can stop. Are designers trying to factor that in? Yes, but that's hard to do. So we're building a tidal zone for today. How do you build a tidal zone for 15 years from now if it's going to be 2 feet higher? It would fail today if you're building it 2 feet too high. What you want to do is have, like we had at Horseshoe Road, a brackish marsh that's gently sloping up. So as the sea level rises, the marsh can migrate with it.
Plants can migrate. Yeah.
They'll migrate. That's what it naturally does. It's going to build a little sediment and it'll grow up. The problem is, in America, we put housing and development right up to the shoreline. There's no place for it to retreat. How rare is Horseshoe Road that you have acres of marsh that extend far away from the river? If you put 100 houses there, now you can't flood it. So the answer is no. We're not accounting for sea level rise. We're not accounting for the retreat that we're going to need to do because we've built it out already. There's nowhere to retreat to. So NJDEP is working on relocating people. I live in Point Pleasant. We're like on the coastal plain. A couple of feet, we're underwater. Sandy, we were underwater. We're out of power. Where are we going to go? We're going to move inland, but what do we do at our houses? So no, I don't think we're addressing it adequately enough, and I don't really have a great solution for it.
I know I've seen a lot of things like on the Atlantic Ocean where they talk about the living shorelines and building out, larger buffer areas to absorb the water and stuff.
100%. So the living shorelines we put in are helping with flooding. Cornell de Villiers is a floodplain. It likes flooding. So downriver, it's going to help what normally floods. And poor people at Bound Brook, it floods like, oh my God, they're just at the low point of 3 rivers. They just flood at the smallest storm. So by building in, it's green infrastructure, by building in floodplains. Look what we did in Wilmington. We welcome the river in. We like flooding. that millions and millions of gallons of water would normally be a real problem in in paved areas. So living shorelines, great solution. Reefs, where you can actually take the sediment and baffle it and collect it on, put a reef out there in reef balls, and it will build sediment on the lee side. Literally, they've built back beaches that were eroding by putting in a double row of reefs. Look at the Pacific Islands that have natural reefs around them. They're very secure. They're not eroding because all the energy is dissipated by the reef, and you have calm waters coming in and dropping the sediment. So that's the living shoreline, living things, reefs. That's the solution that will help with our erosion and with losing shorelines. Louisiana, like down in the Gulf of Mexico and Louisiana, they lose 5 football fields an hour because all the oil and gas things, they banged up and ruined the rivers and changed the sediment loading. 5 football fields an hour are being lost. So they're leading the way in putting these reefs back. They're called wave attenuation devices or reef balls, and trying to rebuild, stopping the erosion and then beginning to add accretion on the beach side, on the land side, from the silt that settles out and rebuilds the beach. Little bits being done in the Chesapeake Bay too.
Bill, this was a fantastic presentation. It's amazing work you're doing.
Thank you, people.
Keep on doing it as long as you can.
All right. And you can email any questions you have, bill@reforestationsolutions.com. If you have any planting project, we go around the country, we'll get a crew, we live out of a hotel, and we'll plant 1 million trees. I'm telling you, that video that I didn't show because somehow it wasn't working, is the crew is amazing, the quality and the quantity. They can plant acres in no time. So I hope you stay in touch and ask me anything you want. I'd be glad to answer.
Very cool. Thank you again.
Thank you, Michael.
Good night, everybody, and see you next month on Wednesday.